Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're investigating what is honestly one of the greatest philosophical crime scenes of the 20th century. We're looking at a deeply ingrained illusion about human nature, a misunderstanding so profound it literally shaped centuries of science, religion, and just everyday common sense. Our detective for this case, the Oxford philosopher Gilbert Ryle, and his 1949 masterpiece, The Concept of Mind, is going to turn everything you thought you knew about yourself completely upside down.
Section 1. The Ghost in the Machine. The crime scene of Cartesian dualism.
To really appreciate Ryle's work, we first need to understand his target, Descartes' official doctrine. For centuries, this doctrine dominated our thinking by splitting human existence into two completely incompatible lives. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the absolute total isolation it creates between these two realms. On one side, you've got the body. It exists in space, it obeys the laws of physics, and, everyone can see it. On the other side, you've got the mind. It doesn't take up space, it completely ignores mechanical laws, and it is strictly private. Basically, you're supposedly locked inside this private theater of consciousness, entirely cut off from the outside world. Ryle derisively nicknamed this Cartesian model the dogma of the ghost in the machine.
And here is the core logical absurdity that Ryle completely exposes. If the mind is entirely non-spatial and non-physical, and the body is entirely physical, how on earth do they interact? Like, how does a purely mental desire to raise your hand cause physical muscles to contract? Or how does stubbing a physical toe create a non-physical feeling of pain? It's a massive paradox. Descartes essentially invented a paramechanical ghost to explain human rationality, which in turn created a problem that is literally impossible to solve.
Section 2. The Great Category Mistake. Ryle's brilliant diagnosis.
Ryle realized that this whole interaction problem is actually a pseudo-problem. It needs a logical fix, not a physical one. He argued that Descartes was, quite literally, tricked by grammar into making a fundamental error. To explain this, picture a foreigner visiting Oxford for the first time. You take him to the colleges, you show him the library, you walk him past the playing fields, and at the very end, he turns to you and asks, "Well, this is all great, but where is the university?" The visitor has made a category mistake. He's treating the university as if it were an additional, physical building, rather than the collective organization of the buildings he literally just saw. Ryle reinforces this with a few more great examples. Imagine a kid at a military parade seeing the battalions march by and then asking, "Okay, but when will the division march past?" Or a spectator at a cricket match asking which player on the field plays the position of team spirit. Team spirit isn't a separate player, right? It's the manner and style of the existing player's play. And this is exactly what Descartes did. He saw physical bodies acting rationally and just assumed there had to be an extra, invisible thing, the mind, causing it all. But the mind is just the manner and style of our physical behavior, not some separate ghost pulling the levers behind the scenes.
Moving on to Section 3. Knowing how versus knowing that. Unpacking the intellect.
So, under the old dualist view, there's this intellectualist legend. It claims that to act intelligently, you must first silently consult a mental rulebook before your body can actually act. But this creates an impossible infinite regress. Think about it. If every intelligent action requires you to first contemplate a rule, well, contemplating a rule is itself an action. So if you do that intelligently, you must have consulted a rule on how to contemplate rules, and then a rule for that rule. It literally goes on forever. If this legend were true, we'd be paralyzed by an endless loop of mental calculations, and we would never, ever get anything done.
And this brilliantly illustrates Ryle's famous distinction. He separates knowing that, which is your propositional knowledge, your facts, your theories, from knowing how, which is operational skill and ability. Think of a chess player who has memorized every single book on strategy. They have the knowing that, but they sit down at the board and get absolutely crushed because they lack the knowing how. On the flip side, a native English speaker knows how to speak flawlessly without ever consciously consulting a mental textbook on grammar. Knowing how is fundamental, and it definitely doesn't require a ghost reading a script. But Ryle wants to be very, very clear here. He isn't saying we're just mindless robots. He draws a hard line between intelligent skills and mere habits. A habit, like biting your nails, is just blind repetition. But an intelligent capacity, like a mountaineer scaling a steep cliff, is flexible, adaptable, and self-correcting. That mountaineer doesn't climb by blind habit, nor are they silently reciting physics equations in their head. Their mind is fully present in the physical performance itself. The intelligent action is literally the mind at work.
Okay, Section 4. Dispositions. The brittle glass and the logic of language. Ryle points out that everyday verbs constantly trick us into hallucinating Cartesian entities. We assume every word must point to a concrete thing or some hidden event. Take the statement, "the glass is brittle." Brittleness isn't some hidden, continuous physical process happening inside the glass while it just sits perfectly still in the cupboard. It's a disposition. It's a prediction. What Ryle calls an inference ticket that tells us if a rock hits the glass, it's going to shatter. And Ryle argues that mental terms like intelligent or knowing French work exactly the same way. When we say John knows French, we don't mean he has a ghost in his head constantly reciting French vocabulary. We mean if he goes to Paris, he'll be able to order a croissant. It's simply a prediction of behavior.
This completely shatters what's known as the myth of volitions. For a long time, philosophers thought that to move your arm, a secret, invisible mental trigger called a volition had to fire. But we never actually observe these, do we? When you solve a math problem, the act of finding the solution isn't a mysterious mental spark. Finding is simply the successful completion of the physical and cognitive act of searching. These achievement verbs trick us into thinking there's an extra mental event, when really it's just the successful physical one.
Section 5. Debunking the inner eye. The illusion of introspection.
So, Cartesian dualists love to argue that we have this private, infallible inner eye watching our own thoughts. Ryle dismantles this mercilessly. First off, you literally cannot divide your attention like that. Try being in a state of absolute, furious rage, and then try to objectively study that pure rage with a scientific inner eye. You can't do it. The rage just evaporates. What we call introspection is actually retrospection. We're just looking back at what we just did or said. Ryle makes the really radical claim that we learn about our own minds the exact same way we learn about others, by observing behavior. You know you're good at chess because you observe yourself winning, not by looking deep into some spiritual chamber.
Think about imagination for a second. Actually, take a moment right now and run your favorite song through your head. Descartes would say you're playing a non-physical audio file in a private mental theater. Ryle says, no way. You are just exercising the physical skill of silent, unvoiced humming. You're simulating or mocking the act of singing, just like a child pretending to be a pirate. There are no ghostly imagined objects in there, just real humans engaging in the incredibly creative activity of pretending.
Finally, Section 6. The legacy of behaviorism. Ryle's impact on psychology. Ryle's work completely reshaped the trajectory of psychology. He warned scientists not to waste time searching for the hidden mechanics of a non-existent mental world, but he is very careful to distinguish his logical behaviorism from the radical behaviorism of people like B.F. Skinner. See, radical behaviorism reduces humans to mere muscle twitches and denies that inner thoughts even exist at all. Ryle doesn't deny inner experience, he just reinterprets it. He isn't trying to replace mental terms with cold biology, he's just correcting our grammar. He wants us to see that behavior is rich, meaningful, purpose of human action, not just the output of some biological machine.
So the crucial point is this. Ryle successfully argued that the mind is absolutely not a ghostly spectator locked inside a bone box. Mental terms describe our multi-track behavioral dispositions. Knowing how is the primary foundation of human intelligence. And self-knowledge isn't mystical introspection, it is solidly grounded in observing our own public behavior. Ryle dragged the mind out of the shadows and put it right back into the real physical world where we actually live, act, and communicate.
But hey, we can't let Ryle off the hook completely. While he brilliantly exorcised Descartes' ghost, later philosophers were quick to point out a lingering mystery. If everything mental is just public behavior and dispositions, what about the raw subjective feel of a toothache? What about that vivid, undeniable, purely internal experience of seeing the color red? Today, this is famously known as the hard problem of consciousness, or qualia. Ryle definitely gave us the tools to map our actions, but did he accidentally sweep the reality of pure feeling under the rug? Well, that is a question to carry with you as you continue your own philosophical journey.
Please like and subscribe.